Thank you, Julie, and good evening, all. And I like to welcome our members and guests for today's webinar section. IIRSM Qatar Branch. Actually, we plan to conduct this session face to face after a long period, but again, due to the organization, what we planned is like we will start the face to face section from January onwards. Because even we start the face to face now, again, November, December, I don't know how the things are going to be to with the venue and all to conduct the face-to-face section. I believe we have to go back to online again on November and December. So what we thought is to straight away we'll start the face-to-face section from January onwards. So, but again, if anyone of you like to come and meet us, please do let us know. You can contact us, right? We have LinkedIn page. Okay, feel free to go through that. So we will be updating all the messages over there, our meetings, updates and all. Even in YouTube channel, the recordings will be there. And I will be in Vibrant office. So if any one of the members have anything, please do visit us. So I am happy to be with you and to do networking sections as well. Or else in the next meeting onwards when we conduct online section, and if you want to be there for face-to-face for a small interaction, please do let us know. So I will be there in Vibrant office at the time of meeting, so we can have a chat over there with a cup of coffee. And I'm so happy that Zuldis has agreed for today's session. So I met Zuldis, it's been 1 month, I believe. She's doing freelance training sessions. So let me introduce her. If I started to introduce, I think I have to read a big paragraph on this. She has lot of qualifications. She has, I think, 20 plus years of experience she has in various industries, in various places. Like I like to read out. Like she's a certified coach for organization culture transformation, certified teacher of leadership. She is program developed at Google. Leadership program, yeah. She is certified teacher of leadership program developed at Google. And she has very other experience in coaching. She coach of science and happiness at work, at Berkling method of well-being, leadership development and competency, practitioner of energy leadership. And she is also a chartered certified accountant. And so if I started to read the resume, it will take, I think her resume itself is like 10 pages when I received it. And she is also a approved ILM certified trainer. So a lot, I can say a lot. So I'm so happy that she accepted to deliver a session over here in today's session. So she will be delivering on stress management, managing stress and its triggers. So I'm so happy. So I'm welcome you to this. So now the platform is yours, right? And if any of the members, if you have any questions, feel free to use the chat box session, the question sections. So at the end of the section, Reese will read out, our vice chair, IIRSM Qatar Branch vice chair, Reese will read out the questions, and so this will be happy to answer all those. And even in between the section, if you have anything, please use the chat function. So Zuldis and Reese will go through that, and they will be happy to share the answers over there as well. So over to you, Zuldis.
Thank you so much, Deepo. I welcome everyone to our session today. Today we are going to discuss about stress management and how we are going to deal with the triggers. I'll skip the introduction part because I think Deepo gave a lot of background about myself. And I will jump to agenda. Today we are going to discuss what is stress, and we will also discuss the human behavior, which is explained by evolution. We will cover flight, fight, freeze mode and neuroscience of automatic behavior. We will cover some strategies how to deal with stress management and triggers. And we will discuss also the benefits of mindfulness and stress management at workplace. So how many of you see yourself in this picture? I know that I cannot see your hands or I cannot see your comments, but I'm sure most of us see yourself in this picture. Multiple deadlines, reports, we need to answer the calls. In the meantime, we need to also have our snacks and get our coffee. So in the modern world, we are distracted and we have multiple priorities to deal with. And definitely it results in stress. Modern day stress is because of the traffic, because of financial issues, because we don't have time, family issues, relationship issues, studies, and many, many other issues which we face on a daily basis. And as a result of this, we end up with never-ending to-do list with so many things on our plates. 80% of employees feel stress on the job, and nearly half say that they need help in order to learn. They need help in learning how to manage stress. This is based on American Institute of Stress. So 80% of people feel stress, and only half of them know how to deal with stress. So I invite you to write down, if you have paper to write down 2 situations in the last year or in this year where you couldn't cope with the stress, and how stress affected different areas of your life. How stress affected your work, your family, the relationship with your friends, health, and your well-being. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to reflect if you faced stress situation last year or this year where you could not cope with stress, and how it affected different areas of your life. If you're willing, you can share it in the chat box.
There's nothing in the chat box at the moment.
Okay. Yeah, so this question is just for you to reflect if you faced any situation where you couldn't cope with stress. And what are the benefits of dealing with stress for you personally? The benefits of dealing with stress personally could be that stress management, when we are able to deal with stress, it improves our physical health, because stress affects our immune system, and it affects also diseases. It leads to different diseases. It affects our mental health, focus and performance. It affects emotional health, spending more quality time with our friends and family and our hobbies. And overall, stress management improves our life and happiness. So it improves overall our well-being. And stress have been referred as a silent killer because it causes heart diseases, high blood pressure, chest pain, and correlations have been found between stress and top 6 causes of death, which is cancer, lung problems, heart disease, liver problems, and suicide. So to summarize, stress is cause of different diseases. It's called silent killer. So if we don't if we don't know how to deal with stress, it can affect different areas of our life, not only physical health as well as mental health. So what is stress? Stress occurs when the pressure is greater than the source. And I like looking at stress from this analogy of the bridge. If we put too much pressure on the bridge will break. So in order to avoid the situation, either we have to alleviate the load, so reduce the load, or improve the breach capacity. The same happens with stress. So if you look at the breach, we can imagine that the breach is our resources, our capacity of human being to deal with stress. And cars or the load that we are getting could be the stress that we are getting internally and externally. So in order to deal with stress, either we have to improve our internal resources, our ability to cope with stress, which is to improve the breach, or to reduce the pressure on us, which is reduce external and internal pressure. We need to learn how to deal with emotions, with triggers, and so on. And in the next slide, we are going to cover how we are going to do it. So as I mentioned, stress is inability to cope with a threat, and threat could be real or imagined, to our well-being, which results in series of responses and adaptations in our body. So the threat could be real or could be imagined. And in the next slide, I will explain that the brain, amygdala, does not recognize between if the threat is real or imagined. So what to do in order to deal with stress? Stress management strategy number one is ability to take a pause before reacting to triggers. So one of the steps could be mindful of the breath. Sometimes they say that we need to count from 10 to 20 or to 50. And one more strategy is to connect to the body. And I'm going to explain why all of these steps are important in order to deal with stress. Imagine that you'll walk away from your office and you will see a tiger. So let's reflect on what will be our immediate reaction. Most of the people will either fight with a flight, which is run away from tiger, from trigger, or from threat. If they're brave enough, they will fight or they will freeze. So whenever we face a trigger or threat, our body puts us into so-called fight, flight, freeze response. And flight, freeze response is a survival mechanism for us to stay alive. So if you see a tiger, I don't think we will start analyzing if this tiger is coming from the zoo or coming from Africa. It really doesn't matter. So what matters is for us to stay alive. That's why our body, our brain gives us only three options. Either we need to fight if we are brave enough, we need to flight, run away, or we freeze. So my usual reaction whenever I face a threat is I freeze. I'll be so shocked that my body puts me into freeze mode. And it's in line with evolution. So a long time ago, when cavemen lived in caves, they had three major problems: what to eat, how to find a shelter, and how not to be eaten by dangerous animals. And throughout the evolution, the human brain was developed in order to put us into this fight, flight, or freeze mode. So we have two parts of the brain, which is called, one part of the brain is called amygdala, and amygdala is emotional part of the brain. And it's also called reptilian brain. So snakes, lizards, all the reptilians have amygdala. Amygdala, it's like an alarm system of our brain. And whenever we face a trigger or whenever we face a threat, our brain puts us, as I mentioned, into fight, flight, freeze mode. So amygdala always scans the environment to make sure that there are no dangers, and that's why amygdala is responsible for our survival instinct. While prefrontal cortex is more modern part of the brain, which is responsible for the logics, for analytical, for analyzing the information, for our language, and so on. So in the previous example, when I mentioned that if we face a tiger, the first reaction, the first part of the brain which will be Dealing with the threat is amygdala. So amygdala will put us into fight, flight, freeze mode. And after some time, when you start analyzing where this tiger came from, why tiger is, where it's appeared, and so on, it means you started analyzing information. It's prefrontal cortex which is taking over and started analyzing the information. So what happens when we face a threat is amygdala, emotional brain, hijacks prefrontal cortex. So it doesn't allow prefrontal cortex to think. As we mentioned earlier, if we face a tiger, it doesn't make sense for us to stay and analyze, because if we'll start analyzing, we'll miss the time to run away from the tiger. So whenever we face a threat, amygdala hijacks or overpowers the thinking brain. As we compare two parts of the brain, amygdala, as I mentioned, is reptilian brain. It's alarm system for dangers. It's responsible for survival, and it's also called emotional brain. The reaction time of amygdala is milliseconds. So it's in milliseconds our brain puts us into fight, flight, freeze mode. Why? To make sure that we react fast to the to trigger, to danger. While prefrontal cortex, as I mentioned earlier, it's responsible for our logics, for creativity, for rational thinking. And if you compare the speed, the reaction time of a prefrontal cortex is 80,000 times slower than amygdala. So it's like computer processing part, right? It's part of the computer which processes information. It takes a lot of brain capacity or a lot of brain energy to process information. That's why the speed of reaction is very slow, and it takes time to switch on. As I mentioned earlier, whenever we face a trigger, the emotional brain hijacks the thinking brain so that we have enough time and we can react to a trigger fast. Whenever we face a trigger, when body or brain puts us into fight, flight, freeze mode, what happens in the body is our heart pumps blood faster, so that there is enough blood which comes into your legs so that you can run away, or into your head so that you can fight with the trigger, with the threat. And also you start trembling, your eyes, like you'll get the dilated pupils, and you get rapid heart, as I mentioned, and you start breathing much faster. So all of these reactions happen for you to be ready to fight with the danger. As a result of this, whenever we face a trigger, whether it's real trigger or perceived trigger, the body, as I mentioned, put us into fight, flight mode, flight, freeze, or fight mode, which results into autopilot. And fortunately, we don't face tigers on an everyday basis in our daily life. However, our brain, amygdala, does not differentiate that much between real threat, which is tigers and like dangerous animals, and perceived threat, which is emails, deadlines, some arguments, which are perceived threats. And whenever we receive email from angry customer or from boss who is requesting for us to submit report on time, we think that it's a real threat and this email is going to kill us, because amygdala thinks that this is a threat, this is a trigger, and it puts us into fight, flight, freeze mode. As I mentioned earlier, we don't face tigers, we don't live in caves anymore, and in order to deal with stress, we need to take a pause. The moment we take a pause, whenever we are triggered, we allow our prefrontal cortex, the thinking brain, to switch on. So remember, I mentioned that whenever we face a threat, the body puts us into amygdala, emotional brain puts us into fight, flight, freeze mode. And when we take a pause, when we face a trigger, then we allow prefrontal cortex to switch on, because prefrontal cortex reaction time is 80,000 times slower than amygdala. And I like this quote by Viktor Frankl, who said, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In this response lies our growth and our freedom." So this quote beautifully describes that whenever we take a pause, we have a choice to respond to a trigger rather than to react. And what could be examples of triggers that put us into fight, flight, freeze mode? Most of the time it's traffic. So you are on the highway and someone cuts you off. It's an automatic trigger for most of us, right? We get triggered. Or someone said you something. So argument or comment from someone, or criticize, when people criticize us, it also triggers us because our amygdala puts us into defensive mode. Email, as I mentioned in earlier example, email from angry customer or from our bosses, which blames, email with some comments which blames us, puts us into fight, flight, and freeze mode, and deadlines. So these are mostly triggers that we face on a daily basis. And these triggers, as I mentioned earlier, are not real triggers, not real threats to our survival. Argument will not kill us, emails and deadlines will not kill us. However, the brain, amygdala, still thinks that these triggers can cause a real threat to our survival. It's very important to identify and understand what triggers us. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to list down all triggers, everything that triggers you. So for me, I can give my example. For me, one of the triggers could be that whenever my kids argue, it triggers me because I love them. 3 of them, I have 3 kids, and whenever they argue, it triggers me a lot. So this is one of my triggers. So let's reflect and think about what are our triggers. You can put your comments in the chat if you want to. Right. So as I mentioned earlier, whenever we are triggered, the best stress management strategy is to take a pause before reacting to triggers. And when we take a pause, we allow emotional brain to calm down and prefrontal cortex, the thinking brain, to take over. Because emotional brain, the name itself, it says emotional brain. When we are triggered, we get into our emotions are triggered as well. So we get angry, we get irritated, we get frustrated. But prefrontal cortex allow us to calm down, to analyze the situation, to use our logics in order to process the information, process the trigger. So one of best advices that I got from my previous boss, was she mentioned that whenever you receive email and you are triggered by this email, don't reply immediately. Reply after half an hour, or if you can reply next day. And it was best advice that I received in dealing with emails which trigger us, because if I reply to email immediately, it means I allow my emotional brain to take over. And next day when I regret about email that I sent being emotional, when I regret next day, it means my brain, my prefrontal cortex, started analyzing situation. So when we take a pause, we allow our thinking or logical brain to process information and take rational decisions.
Hello, I've just got some answers to your question regarding some of the triggers. Can I read them out?
Yes, please.
Okay, what we've got here is arguments, conflict, time frame, as you previously mentioned, and trying to meet deadlines without available resources. Job security, particularly in this country, because it's a precarious workforce, so that can be changes, big changes, worried about some of the things and how it's going to impact on you. So there's some of the questions that have come through.
Right,
okay.
right. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Thank you so much, Luis. Yeah, so thank you for sharing thank you for putting your comments in the chat. Yes, all of this makes sense. We get triggered by regular issues such as arguments, traffic, criticism, right? But as you mentioned, job security is one of the triggers as well, because one of the instincts or basic human needs is security, right? So when we feel safe, when we feel secure, we feel that our basic human need is met. Unfortunately, as you mentioned, in this country, we don't have always the job security, so it can be triggered as well. So if we can move to another, yeah. If I wanted to continue on how to respond to triggers. So whenever you face a trigger, whether it's real or perceived threat, then we can use so-called SBNRR strategy. And SBNRR stands for stop, brief, notice, reflect, and respond. So let me give example. Let's say you are driving on the highway and someone cut you off. The immediate reaction or amygdala response would be either you start fighting or you start arguing with the person or using not nice words. So it could be one of the reactions, right? Fight, flight, or freeze. We can use so-called SBNRR approach for us to allow our prefrontal cortex to switch on. So stop means you stop before reacting. Second is brief. We bring awareness to our breath and we start noticing our breath. Most of the people notice their breath or feel their breath in the nostrils, or you can feel your breath in your chest. The third one is we notice. We notice how we feel in our body. So if we are angry, most of the time we feel anger in the chest, or we can feel headache, we can feel heaviness in our head, or we can feel heaviness in our shoulders. So notice is we notice how emotion is manifested in the body. The fourth step is we reflect. We reflect on what is going on, how this trigger affected me. And the last one, we respond. We respond by taking a pause and we respond by using our logic. So these steps help us to prefrontal cortex to switch on, because by the moment you go through all of the steps, your brain already started analyzing the situation. So stop, breathe, notice, reflect, and respond. And if you want to remember only one thing out of these 5 steps, remember stop. Stop before reacting to a trigger. Sometimes we can get busy, or in the middle of argument, maybe you don't have time to remember all of the steps, or you'll just forget about 5 steps. So if you can remember only first step, which is stop before reacting to a trigger, the moment you stop, your prefrontal cortex, your thinking brain will switch on, and you can respond to the situation rather than react to a trigger. And we also use so-called 3 breaths practice, which is kind of shorter version of SBNRR practice. 3 breaths is first, you bring attention to your breath. Notice where you feel your breath, maybe in your nostrils, maybe in your chest, maybe in your belly. Second, you relax your body. And third, you ask yourself, what is really important right now? Do I need to be angry? Do I need to be frustrated by this trigger? So on step number 3, it's you have a choice. You have a choice how to respond to a situation. Now, the next stress management strategy that I want to cover is appreciation and gratitude. Many religions have appreciation and gratitude. Thanksgiving days, in Islam, we say Alhamdulillah, means thanks God. So most of religions use appreciation and gratitude for us to count our blessings. And there is scientific explanation for appreciation and gratitude, which I will explain in the next slide. But before we go to scientific explanation or neuroscience explanation of gratitude and appreciation, I would like you to reflect on the following questions. If you could share 2 things if you are grateful for your job, for your current job. And if you can write down 2 things that you appreciate about your best colleague. So I can start, I can share my gratitude. 2 things that I'm grateful for my job is because I'm a trainer, so it allows me to share my knowledge and my experience, because sharing my knowledge and my skills is one of my passions. And second is it also allows me to learn every day. I learn, my learning curve is very steep, so every day I learn something new, which helps to expand my brain. It helps to expand my knowledge. This is my answer to question number 1. And 2 things that I appreciate about my best colleague. So in my previous company, I had my best colleague, my best friend, one of my best friends, and she is very supportive, and she is there whenever I feel down. So she's there when I feel low, and she's there when I'm feeling good. So support and care is 2 things that I really appreciate about my best colleague. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to reflect on these questions and share 2 things that you are grateful for your job and 2 things that you appreciate about your best colleague. If you want, you can share these comments or replies in the chat. Now let's move on. So how do you feel after being grateful for your job? I'm sure if you counted your blessings, you feel much better. As I mentioned earlier, there is explanation to gratitude and appreciation from neuroscience perspective. Whenever we express appreciation and gratitude, the reward center in brain releases dopamine, and dopamine is hormone of happiness, which leads to intrinsic motivation. So whenever we express our gratitude and appreciation, and we count our blessings, we feel happy and we are motivated to do new things. On the top of this, gratitude stimulates hypothalamus, and it's part of the brain which regulates stress. So it means that not only we feel happy when we count our blessings, but it also helps us to be less stressed. So there are double benefits when we count our blessings. 66% of employees leave their jobs as they don't feel appreciated. And what we can do at work in order to use appreciation and gratitude. We can use gratitude wall. In some of the companies, they put sticker notes on the wall and they share, as we just shared in the chat, they share things that they appreciate about their job, or they share the qualities of their best qualities of their colleagues. We can also start meetings from appreciations. Rather than jumping into agenda, we can go around the table and express appreciation and gratitude to our colleagues. It also useful to encourage. It's useful also at the workplace to encourage expressing gratitude via email, or even better, face-to-face. Again, simple thing like taking our staff for lunch they will make them feel that they are appreciated at work. Sometimes provide hobby-related awards. So in my previous company, we used to get movie tickets for the family, and we felt that the company is really taking care of us, as well as some rewards and team building activities and ceremonies. So again, in my previous company, we used to have so-called star ceremony, quarterly stars, annual stars, and it was like a huge event, like Oscar ceremony, when CEO of the company used to give us rewards for best performance. And best performance not only in terms of achieving company goals, but best performance as a team, best performance in terms of supporting well-being of employees, and so on. So it was a big ceremony where everyone felt that they appreciated by the company. And there is a book which is called 5 Languages of Appreciation. Every one of us have 5 languages of appreciation. Sorry, everyone has their own language of appreciation. And if you are interested, you can check out the book, 5 Languages of Appreciation at Work. The next stress management strategy is self-awareness. And self-awareness is based on a book by Daniel Goleman, which the book is called Emotional Intelligence. And emotional intelligence has 5 layers. The first one is self-awareness, is ability to understand our emotions. Self-management is ability to manage our emotions. The third one is motivation. The fourth one is empathy. Empathy is ability to understand emotions of others, and social skills. So all of the steps help us to build our emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence, as the name itself says, intelligence to deal with emotions. So let's cover self-awareness. So this is the definition of emotional intelligence, which basically states that emotional intelligence is ability to monitor our own and other feelings and emotions. However, we need to discriminate among them, meaning that we need to understand and set the boundaries between what we feel and what other person feels. And this helps us to guide our own behavior and actions. There are multiple benefits of emotional intelligence at the workplace. Teams who master emotional intelligence leads to teams who master emotional intelligence, they perform better. It also improves decision making. Emotional intelligence affects also staff turnover, so it reduces staff turnover. It improves well-being, and it also improves leadership ability. So there is the link between self-awareness and body awareness. When we are aware of our emotions, we can connect our emotions to our body. And there was an experiment where group of people were shown the image of different images. So these people saw the image of other people who experience different emotions like anger, fear, disgust, happiness, and so on. And while these people were watching the images, different images which can evoke the emotion of anger, fear, and so on, their body was scanned, right? And what they noticed that whenever we feel anger, the upper part of the body is activated. So, for example, when I feel angry, most of the time I feel anger in my chest, as if there is lack of air. You can see also the hands, right? When person feels angry, the hands are activated. So it's readiness of person to fight. When we are scared, again, it's the upper body, upper part of the body is also activated. And if you look at the happiness, then the whole body is active. So when we feel happy, like we feel butterflies all over the body, we want to run, we want to jump. So what I'm trying to say here is every emotion is manifested in the body. And when we learn to, whenever we are triggered or whenever we feel pleasant or unpleasant emotions, whenever we learn to turn attention to our body, we learn to regulate ourselves. So remember in the previous strategy, I said that whenever you face a trigger, we can use the strategy which is called SBNRR. And one of them was notice. Notice is you notice how emotion is reflected in your body. If you feel angry, feel the anger in your body, where you feel your anger. Where you feel, when you feel scared, feel where do you feel your fear. So let me share my example. Whenever I fly and whenever there is a turbulence, I feel scared, like I'm scared of turbulence. And I just connect to my body. Whenever I'm scared, I feel butterflies in my belly. I feel tension in my belly. So the moment I connect to my body, it helps me to calm down. Amygdala starts calming down, and my prefrontal cortex started analyzing information. So my prefrontal cortex says the chance of plane accidents is very low, right? So I started analyzing information. I calm myself down. So this is one of the stress management strategies, is whenever you are triggered, whenever you feel some unpleasant emotion, bring awareness to your body and ask yourself where I feel this emotion in my body, what I feel right now, what is going on in my body. The moment you start analyzing what is happening in your body, it helps you to calm down. Not immediately, obviously, but it takes time. But it's one of the best best stress management strategies. So when it comes to checking what is going on in your body, whenever you feel strong, unpleasant emotion, you can use so-called head, body, and heart check-in. So whenever you're triggered, you bring awareness to your head. You ask yourself, what kind of thoughts I have right now in my head? These thoughts are negative, or these are positive, or I'm criticizing myself, or I'm criticizing other people. So you just analyze what is going on in your head. Step number 2 is, as I mentioned earlier, you bring awareness to your body. Where do you feel this emotion in your body? Perhaps you're triggered and you feel some heaviness in your shoulders or some pain in your back. Or maybe you feel headache because the emotion is so strong, you're so triggered that you feel that your head is very heavy, you feel headache. And step number 3 is you connect to your heart. You can even place your hand on your heart and ask yourself, what are my values? What is my intention? What do I want from this situation? So this is very intimate practice, but it helps also to deal with stress, and not only with stress, but whenever you feel some unpleasant emotion, you can use head, body, and heart check-in. So to summarize, when it comes to self-awareness, first one, we can use so-called body scan. And body scan is one of the practices where you scan your body from the top of the head down to your feet. and you scan your body, scan different parts of the body, connecting to your body parts and asking yourself, what do I feel right now? So for example, you can start scanning your body from your head and you ask yourself, what are the body sensations in my head? Then you turn to your face, what are sensations on my face? Then you move to your shoulders, what do I feel in my shoulders? Then you connect your chest, to your back, to your belly, and to your legs. So you scan your body from the top of the head down to your feet, noticing any sensations or noticing any tension in your body. And when we scan, we don't judge our sensations bad or good. We just behave as a silent observer, as if it's someone else's body. And body scan practice also helps us to release stress. I use it quite often when I'm tired, or if I have any sleep issues before I go to bed. I just scan my body and it helps me to immediately relax and feel relaxed. And second is head, body, and heart check-in, which I mentioned earlier. Is just to connect to your head to check your thoughts, to connect to your body to check your emotions, and connect to your heart, check your values and your intentions. The average person has around 70,000 thoughts per day, and we have around 3,000 thoughts per hour, and our brain produces around 50 thoughts per minute. So our brain is like a popcorn machine. It pops thoughts all the time, and sometimes we don't realize even that we are thinking about. So it happens automatically. And our mind wanders 47% of the time. So we can sit or we can be physically during the meeting, but we are thinking about some nice vacation. And 98% of thoughts are the same thoughts that we had the day before, and 80% of the thoughts are negative. So it means that we keep repeating the same thoughts, and majority of these thoughts are negative, which leads to stress, anxiety, depression. And as we mentioned earlier, stress causes 80% of diseases. So the good news is we can change our habit within 21 days, meaning that if you start analyzing and you start observing your thoughts, after 21 days, we'll start observing that what kind of thoughts I have. Do I have positive thoughts? Do I have unpleasant thoughts? Do I criticize myself? Do I judge myself? Do I criticize or judge others? Do I keep rethinking and ruminating about the same subject over and over again? Because our brain or our ability to ruminate and rethink and overanalyze causes more stress. And sometimes we end up, before we sleep, we end up having different thoughts and we can't sleep. Like different thoughts, I'm hungry, my boss was rude to me today, or some random thoughts such as, why don't penguins freeze on ice? So what I'm trying to say here is we need to be aware what kind of thoughts we have, because our thoughts create our reality. And most of the time, as I mentioned, thoughts are negative, and negative thoughts cause more stress in our life. And we also have ability to change perspective. So whether we look at every situation as a half full or half empty. Again, it's our ability to reframe the situation and look at the situation from different perspective. And another stress management strategy is, if life gives you a lemon, make a lemonade. So I'll give my example. Couple of months ago, I lost my job. Coming back to the question of job security, which was shared in the chat. So I lost my job and I was quite stressed. I was thinking about how I'm going to pay my bills, how I'm going to pay for my kids' school fees, and so on, so on. And I just recall that I am a trainer, so I used to be employed as a full-time employee in the company, but I also have skills as a trainer. So I just called the training companies, and I said I used to work with them before. So I said, I'm available whenever you need trainings, let me know. And within 2 weeks, I got a lot of calls, a lot of requests to deliver different types of training: leadership, stress management, emotional intelligence, customer service, and many other trainings. So what I'm trying to say here is life gave me a lemon, so I lost my job, and my brain started thinking. The first reaction, obviously, amygdala put me into fight, flight, freeze mode. So I was shocked. As I mentioned earlier, my usual reaction is freeze. So I was shocked and I didn't know what to do. And then after analyzing, my prefrontal cortex, my thinking brain, started analyzing the situation. And I thought, okay, what I can do, what I can make out of this lemon. How can I make a lemonade? And basically what I'm trying to say, that every opportunity, every problem, every challenge gives us opportunity, right? We never know about these opportunities. Even if you lose a job, maybe we can start our business, or we can go back to our country and start something else there. You never know, because the life is full of opportunities, and the key here is to stay positive and as I mentioned, make a lemonade from a lemon. The last stress management strategy that I want to cover today is self-care. So whenever we board a flight, the rule which they share is put your own mask first before helping others. So this is basic safety rule. Why they say it? Because if we cannot help ourselves, if we are fainted in terms of if something happens to us, we cannot help others. So self-care is best management strategy. And self-care is not only sleeping on time, nutrition, taking care of our body, taking care of our mental health, making sure that we dedicate some time to our hobbies. It's not only that, but it's also treating ourselves as a best friend. Sometimes we have, tendency of we judge ourselves a lot, or we criticize a lot ourselves. And the invitation here is to treat yourself as a best friend. So what I invite you to do right now is to write self-compassionate letter. And I'll give you for this around 3 minutes, as I'm just cautious of time. So I'll give for this around 2-3 minutes. And what we are going to do right now is we are going to write a letter to ourselves from the perspective of the best friend. So you write yourself a letter from the perspective of your best friend. And this friend knows you well, understands you well. And I invite you to write, what would you say to yourself about the challenges or opportunities that you are facing right now? What kind of letter would you write to yourself about challenges and opportunities that you're facing right now? So you can start writing a letter stating your name and writing yourself a letter as a best friend. For example, I can start, dear Juldis, I know that you are going through a lot in your life, and so on. So you write a letter to yourself as your best friend. And I will give for this around 2-3 minutes. I usually write this letter once a quarter. So it helps me to put my thoughts into the paper, and it also helps me to find new perspective or new solutions to any challenge that I'm facing. You can use this letter also. You can write a letter to yourself on a monthly basis, on a quarterly basis, whatever works for you. It's very healing practice. And they, based on the research,
I've just written mine, my letter based on that. It's quite interesting actually, because he's not my friend anymore. I didn't like what he wrote.
Thank you for sharing this.
It's interesting to write though.
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, sometimes we criticize ourselves, right? And the way we treat ourselves, we'll never treat our best friends. So this letter invites us to treat ourselves as a best friend. There are journaling benefits, and people who lost their jobs, they wrote about their feelings for 5 days, and within 6 months, 68% of these people who journaled found jobs, versus 27% of people found jobs. This is a group who did not journal. So as I mentioned earlier, journaling helps us to find solutions, and it helps us to put our thoughts into the paper and find new perspectives. So again, just to be aware of the time, what we covered today is we covered, I wrote 3, but in fact we covered 4 strategies to deal with stress. Is first, ability to take a pause before reacting. And as we mentioned earlier, when we take a pause, it helps prefrontal cortex to switch on. Prefrontal cortex is our thinking brain, and it helps to calm down our emotional brain, which is amygdala. We also covered appreciation and gratitude. So counting our blessings helps us to also deal with stress, because it releases dopamine. Dopamine is hormone of happiness, and it also helps to regulate hypothalamus. So it regulates stress as well. We also covered that whenever we are triggered, it makes sense to bring awareness to your body, because there is a link between emotions and your body. Every emotion is reflected in the body. And the moment we connect to our body, it helps us to calm down, and it helps us also, it helps prefrontal cortex to switch on. And last one, we mentioned that self-care. Self-care is not only taking care of our body, eating on time, sleeping on time, but self-care is also treating ourselves as a best friends. So these are 4 strategies that I wanted to cover during our sessions. Now we'll open our chat for any questions that you may have.
Can't see any new ones. I have a question though, if I can ask.
Yes, please.
Okay. Probably when I looked into this quite a few years ago, in England, most occupational injuries you could claim compensation for, and then they started recognizing occupational stress as a real life. But the problem was you weren't able to claim compensation for it because you cannot clinically diagnose stress, because we all live in a stressful environment, and some stress is good. Going for a run is stressful. At the same time, being overloaded with work, computers breaking down is equally stressful. So it's difficult at that time to distinguish between social stress, the emotional stress, and some of the issues that you talked about, and prescribing those as a occupational related stress issues. And they couldn't distinguish between the two, because obviously if it's occupational related stress, then there's a case for compensation because it's work related.
Right.
But normal life stresses was difficult, and I think at the time, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, that it's still impossible to identify an individual's stress levels. But
Yeah.
listening to what you say, that might be possible because the way that the body responds. But that was one of the difficult challenges that we had, whether to relate it to occupational stress or to social or outside of work stress.
Yeah, right. Thank you so much, Liz. Quite interesting observation. As you rightly said, it's very difficult to really identify whether you're stressed because of the work or you're stressed because of any other triggers. But if somehow you can prove that your stress is caused by any conflict at work or any argument, then perhaps it could be categorized as occupational stress. So someone could be stressed, or some people get heart attack because of the arguments at work or conflict at work. Right? So as you mentioned, it's yeah, sometimes in some scenarios or situations, it's really difficult to kind of find the link between what causes stress, because stress can be caused by many issues, but sometimes we can really find the link.
Yeah, that was one of the things the HSC executive said. They said if you can prove it's psychosocial stress, then it's prescribed disease because it's affecting your mental health being.
Yes.
Compared to me going for a run and I'm just getting out of breath and tired and want to sit down, quick whiskey and I'm fine.
Right.
And I think that's how they came around it, that if you could prove that it was a mental stimulus or augmented your mental health, then it could be described as a prescribed disease. Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that really interesting presentation. I enjoyed it, as I'm sure everyone else did. Yeah, so I'd like to thank you for taking the time out to present this webinar this evening. I'd like to thank everyone else for attending. Just as a reminder, your CPD certificates will be coming out at this time tomorrow. So I'd like to wish you all a very good evening.
Yeah, and just you asked about attendees. We had a healthy 27 attendees online listening to you. So a lot of people out there that learn quite a lot. It's a nice angle on stress-related incidents. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much. Have a nice evening.
Thanks a lot.